Well, good morning, church. I hope that you're doing well and staying inside and that you had a nice, easy morning with a nice cup of coffee. You might have that out right now. Um, this is an interesting time. It's trying in a lot of ways, uh, but it's pushing us outside of our comfort zone. And in order to be the church during this time, we are really having to be creative and think in new ways about how we can love people and how we can continue to be faithful as Christians when we're not allowed to go outside or talk to other people or see others. Um, it's been pretty interesting. Another thing that's been interesting is, as if you've been a part of our Sunday morning class, you'll know that we've been going through the Stations of the Cross every week, and this sort of ties in with the Lent season, and it's sort of gearing up towards Easter. And a lot of my sermon series has been geared towards that as well, thinking about, what is the Mark's in his gospel trying to do as he thinks about the death and resurrection of Jesus, and also for me in my personal devotion, how all of this stuff ties into the time of Easter, the season of Lent, which we're in right now. The text this morning, as you will have read now, is Mark chapter 12, verses 28 through 37. And this is a text that this wasn't one that I chose, but it was sort of the next one in the series. And I was going to preach on this anyways, regardless of current events. But this text is sort of interesting. It's iconic, and most people hold this to be the moral epicenter of Christianity. What does it mean to be a Christian? This is what people think about. This is the text that people come to. In the Gospels at least, this is one of the texts. Jesus is encountered by a scribe, a teacher of the law, who comes and asks him, Jesus, what is the greatest command of in the law? And Jesus says, the most important one is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And the second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. So this is common, and this is what we generally think of as really what Christianity is about. It's about loving God and loving our neighbor. But what's interesting about Mark's gospel is that it's a little different from Matthew, and it's a little different from Luke, in that the scribe here is represented very well. He's thought of as very well. He responds to Jesus. He says, well said, teacher. You are right in saying that God is one and there is no other but him. To love him with all your heart and with all your understanding and with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself is more important than all burnt offerings and sacrifices. So this is one of the rare times in the gospel where the scribe agrees with Jesus, where Jesus is not at odds with the authorities, there. And so it's interesting. Why does Jesus encounter this man, and why is this man portrayed differently in this gospel as opposed to other texts where the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees are trying to trap Jesus with their questions? Instead, Jesus ends this story by telling this scribe, you are not far from the kingdom of God. So this scribe is thought very positively. And I think one of the reasons for that in this text is because if a first century Jew was wondering about who this Jesus was and what his teachings were about, I think generally the question would be raised as to whether or not he was an extremist, whether or not he was a heretic of sorts, whether or not he was an Orthodox Jew, whether or not he believed and obeyed the law as a faithful Jew would have done. And I think this text is one of the reasons for the scribe being where he was and responding the way he did, is that Mark is stating to his audience that he's writing to. He's saying Jesus was not a heretic. Jesus was not unorthodox. In fact, Jesus wasn't the only person to think that these were the greatest parts of the law. There were other Jews who were saying that at the time. So in fact, Jesus was emphasizing something that was already there. And he wasn't coming up with something that was totally new and totally outside of the Jewish faith, but that Jesus was in fact very Jewish. And what Jesus believed about that others should do, that was in fact there within Judaism all along. But there are three parts of the command that Jesus gives. The first one is usually glossed over. We usually say, what are we about? We're about loving God and loving our neighbor. But the first part is interesting and sort of stands out to me during this time. Jesus quotes from Deuteronomy 6, and he says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." This is first. This is the assumption of the commands that follow next. That God, the Lord our God, is one. That Yahweh is one. Now, what this did in the first century culture, I think, is that it emphasized in a polytheistic culture that the Jews were monotheistic. They worship one God, that there is one God who is sovereign above all else. And that's who they worship. They don't worship all these other gods. They don't worship anything else besides God. Yahweh is God alone. Yahweh is the Lord alone. So then, with Yahweh's identity proclaimed, that the Lord, or the Yahweh is God, and He is one. With that stated, with Yahweh being our only example of worship, the only one in whom we should worship, the command is then given, love the Lord your God with total devotion. Love Him with all your heart. Love Him with all your soul, with all your strength. Love Him with all your mind. Give everything that God has given you. Give it back to God. Worship Him. Worship Him alone. He alone is worthy of our worship. Not other gods, not our nation, not our jobs, not our children, not our family. God alone is worthy of our worship. And so that's sort of the first two things. That Yahweh is God alone. Secondly, that He deserves our total worship. And I think that's interesting today because it points towards what we might try to find, what we might think of for our survival. What is it that we trust in to save us? What is it that we put our hopes in that will deliver us from pain, from anxiety, from sickness? What are we trusting in? And ultimately, what are we hoping to deliver us from death? We love Yahweh because Yahweh is God alone. Yahweh is the Lord on high. He is the Lord of hosts. He is powerful and He is mighty, and He alone holds us in His hands and holds our destinies safe with Him. And then the part that follows this is Jesus' command to love your neighbor. The second command is this: love your neighbor as yourself. So that's a really difficult thing to do right now because of the situation that we're in, where we are holed up inside with our families, and we're staying away from our neighbors. We're trying not to get in contact. We're maintaining 6 feet of distance. We're bumping elbows and not shaking hands. And it really is, we have to be creative right now with how we love our neighbors. And the truth is I've seen a lot of people going out of their ways to care for other people during this time, thinking about others, taking care of their needs. But I think that's something that we're going to have to continue to do over the next several weeks, over the next month perhaps, is we're going to have to think and think about ways that we can love our neighbors. You might, if you have phone numbers saved of people, call them up, check on them, see how they're doing. Tell them that you're thinking about them, that you're praying for them. Ask them if there's anything that can be done. If you have a neighbor who their yard is getting a bit unwieldy and they're unable to do it, if you just go over and mow it and take care of it, that might be okay. That might be a way of showing love right now, and not having to talk to them. But regardless, the sentiments are there. Maybe sending a card in the mail expressing that, I'm thinking about you. I know I haven't seen you in a month. I know I haven't been outside in a month, but you're on my mind. You're in my heart. And I think this church is very good at doing those sorts of things, and we're already doing those sorts of things. But I think we have to continue to be creative in how we love our neighbors. But we're doing a good job. So with that, that's sort of what I have for you this morning. Yahweh is God alone. Yahweh is sovereign. We should worship Him. Our destinies are in His hands. He is deserving of our worship. And lastly, because of who He is and how He loves us, we need to love our neighbors, even when we have to be creative to do it. We need to be considerate of others. So I hope this morning that you have a relaxing day, that you maybe can get outside and get some fresh air, even if you're not able to go interact with others. But exercise, drink hot chocolate and coffee, and maybe have a fire inside, whatever's going to help you get through this. Do what you need to do. Take care of yourself during this time. Think about, get a routine going. But, we're going to make it. We're going to make it through this. And if you do have any needs, if you do have any things that you need taken care of, get in contact with me. My phone number is 806-346-1288, or my email address is tml17a@acu.edu. Email me, call me, anything that you need, I'll try to help you out, or our elders or any of the members around here. We want to be there for each other during this time. But I want to thank you for tuning in. I hope you have a great rest of the Lord's day this morning. God's blessings on you.